Swimming like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hey everyone, I'm Mark Scribner, your host of the Shrimp Tank Boston with JJ War from School Twist today. Another amazing company, Boston-based guy with some cool roots, being a veteran in his experience running this company. I'd like to remind all our listeners you can find this show, all previous shows, by smashing that like button. I'm going to ask JJ to say that too. Follow this show, like I mentioned. We are nationally syndicated through iHeart. We are in 13 cities, also in Canada, Google, Stitch, SoundCloud. Basically anywhere that you can find your podcast, you can follow the Shrimp Tank. With that said, we have JJ War from School Twist. He's a Boston-based entrepreneur, storied history in startups, engineering background, and he started this company in the enrichment space and saw a really good, viable business opportunity from his own personal experience with his child, looking at some of the things that he probably wanted to have himself as he was a young person. So JJ, welcome to the show, and I'm excited to hear about School Twist today.
Well, Mark, thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
So let's get into the thick of what School Twist is. We can talk about your experience with being a veteran and some of those things that you're bringing to the table. But right out of the gate, what does School Twist do?
Yeah, School Twist. Thanks for asking. So let me paint the picture. If you're not already a parent with little kids at school, so this is the space we deal in. So typically, or not typically, but at a lot of schools, a lot of great schools, they will have these after-school classes. So the kids go through the day and, they learn reading and, math and whatnot. But often parent volunteers will organize these after-school classes. So a kid might learn chess, or we've seen comic book, writing, book clubs, tennis and whatnot. And what our School Twist is a SaaS product, and it's for those volunteers that are organizing these after-school enrichment programs. And the core feature is it does a catalog, it handles registration, lets parents pay. Behind the scenes for these volunteers, the real impact is it tracks like what the homeroom teachers are, communicates with the homeroom teachers where the kids go, communicates with the vendors, and tries to just make that more contained and less of a kind of this entrepreneurial venture and more of a, just taking care of business venture.
So there's resources, a platform that makes the whole experience, a deliverable, much more easy to kind of execute. And then I would assume that there's very big scalability as you kind of go across the country. You can add, it could be, like you said, maybe robotics or electrical something. But is it scalable at this point? Like once the kind of the chassis is built, you can bring it across the country?
Yeah. So right now, if you go to schooltwist.com, like you could actually sign up for the software at your school, and this is our MVP, and it totally works. And we've been in Boston for a few years now, and kind of have fleshed out all the details. Where we are is our next step is we have run these programs also, so we've run it at local schools, and not only helping these other schools, but there's all these steps. And so what we're doing now is or maybe road mapping of adding on features that wherever there's kind of labor. And, we know there's labor because we're doing ourselves, like an email back and forth or back and forth with a teacher or a principal. We're putting those in, we're engineering out all those that process. So it becomes really, really, scalable. But every school gets their own site basically. So they could kind of customize it to themselves. It works out kind of nicely.
JJ, is that, you mentioned some towns, I can name them, but, some more affluent towns would have more resources, maybe better sports programs, but maybe not good enrichment programs. Is this something that's well received in inner cities, or is there a perfect demographic where, if you say, I think from a marketplace perspective, where's the need here?
Well, that's a great question. So like, our mission is to get more schools to have great enrichment classes, and the schools that already have great enrichment classes, we want them to have better enrichment classes. So what we kind of see is typically it's where a school has a lot of stay-at-home parents, because like if there's a mature sports program, say in a community, then you're fine. Like, you just sign up and you go to these sports programs. But let's say your kid isn't really into sports. They want to do STEM, they want to do robotics or chess or something like that. Then you have to like go start that program. And sometimes there's vendors nearby and you want to bring them in, or maybe you have to learn how to teach chess yourself. But that takes a lot of time. Typically, that's a stay-at-home parent. And so that is sometimes more affluent, sometimes it's not, but it's definitely a profile. And so for those communities, this is like a no-brainer. It just makes it so it takes less time. However, we want it so that you don't have to be in a community with a lot of stay-home parents. So let's say you have two working parents and they're busy. Well, they could maybe afford stuff, but they don't have the time to do it. So our what we do is we come in and make it so it's more realistic for them to add programs and grow something out. Or you go outside of a metro area where there's not a lot of vendors. We want to make it so it's easier to organize stuff, maybe easier to eventually like bring in. You can't really have vendors, but you could say, hey, here's what you're going to teach, and just lower that cognitive burden. So away from the city, or places with less time. So that's, and then there's all these other funny dynamics that happen. So like where my daughter went to school, it was what was called a Title IX school. And that means there's a certain percentage of free and reduced lunches. Typically, that means they don't have great after school enrichment programs. At her school, they had an awesome one. And I'm familiar with a lot of schools. And this is like world class. Like, it was really fantastic. And it just worked well. After my daughter left, and this, regardless of me, they actually ended up shutting down their program. And that was just, you get this volunteer drift. And this is this other aspect. Like, we want to keep it so that it's not dependent on just really motivated kind of heroic volunteers, but it could work with a lot of different volunteers. So
I was going to say that because, from my own experience, having younger children, whether it be sports and enrichment, once the kids kind of like move on to the next thing, there's this big vacuum that's created by, like you said, like a super volunteer, and there's no continuity after that.
Yeah. So like, I like this analogy of like of a small business. So to set up one of these programs, if it's just a single chess class, that's different than like a really great school that might have like 40 classes. That it's kind of like starting a small to medium, like a small business. And it's like, you start it, you figure it out, you do the legwork, you set up your systems, and then it's a labor of love. It's real passion. They get it going, and then their kid graduates out, and it gets older, and so that parent moves on, and then they can typically hand it off to another volunteer, and the other volunteer like takes it over, but the systems are like, yeah, sometimes they're kind of crazy, and it makes sense. And then like that's often okay, but then you do it again, and then that's where the real trouble happens. It's almost like a 3 generations of shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve thing. And we're trying to engineer in that continuity right into the system between training and certification, so the other parents could just be confident that that next volunteer will handle it. And then we want to be like the backup of like, hey, volunteer moves, they get transferred or something like that. You don't want the program to shut down. It's like, well, contact School Twist, and there's certain things we can do remotely, and we'll help
So
out.
the continuity with School Twist, the continuity is always in the initial design. It was there to make sure that you're not having like a good program and then it tapers off. It's just if someone for relatively probably easy bringing up the speed, someone can punch themselves in and figure out what's going on without kind of messing up the program.
Yeah. We're trying to bake that right into the DNA of the company going forward. Yeah.
So JJ, the tagline of the show is where book smarts and street smarts collide. You have I want to talk a little bit about what you bring to the table from being in the Air Force, being a vet, and kind of what you garnered from experience there. Because part of this business concept for you, from my understanding, is that you got a lot from the services from a professional enrichment perspective, and then with having a kid, you're like, geez, this is lacking somewhere.
Yeah. So, my own background used to be in the Air Force, and then got out and did some entrepreneurship stuff and worked at a family business, and had this great experience all the time in San Francisco and Florida and DC. Now I'm in Boston, but I started this, my previous company, my son wanted to do robotics and I want to do robotics. And we're like, why don't we know how to do robotics? And so I tried to find him some classes at the rec department. They weren't really right. And so I got into, well, maybe I could just teach it myself. It's like, oh, this is challenging. And so I ended up, long story short, I ended up making this enrichment class for him. And we taught it at the school because parents really wanted it. It was this engineering class with Lego. It's like, this is great. And parents loved it. And it's like, so in the Air Force, I loved having this bigger mission. And then I'm out and doing stuff. It's like, hey, my eyes were kind of open to, you know, kids need extra stuff, not just sports, but, my kid wasn't sporty, but he was really into STEM and robotics. Like, this is awesome. I want him and other kids to have access to that. So I kind of glommed on to this kind of the service side. And I super found the ongoing motivation. Like, if I could have this sense of what am I doing to make the world kind of better, then it is guiding, and it's motivating, and it's I think a great way to run a business. It's easier to bring people on. You can get people behind the mission because it's good. This is sort of the leadership side that I got from the Air Force of like, let's think big, and people want to get behind big stuff. So School Twist is a spin-off of that company. We went to schools and taught engineering at various schools, and we needed software to manage registration and tracking, and every school's a little different. So we had all these things to handle this uniqueness of each community. And in the beginning of the pandemic, I ended up selling that company to my partner, and started focusing on the School Twist side, and we're trying to productize it. Our new mission is around getting all of those, all the schools to have great access to enrichment stuff. Not just my previous company, we'd go and teach ourselves. I want to put the infrastructure in so people could kind of help themselves, so to speak, and not be dependent on any one, company going and going places. So yeah, that's kind of the mission side. I'm a big advocate of that, and I find as the years go on, the farther I am from the Air Force, the more important it is for me to stay involved in that. So related to that, you had mentioned the veteran side. So when I moved up here in Boston not so long ago, I met was now my partner Chris, and we are both veterans, and then we work with other veterans that want to be entrepreneurs, and so we are mentors for them in the Boston community and sort of help them think through their strategy and kind of give them the lay of the land. So I'm not saying I'm necessarily better, but I've seen a lot more than some of the newer, younger entrepreneurs. And that's been like really rewarding. I like that a lot.
Well, I mean, obviously you bring, your skill set, your history, and sounds like your values are amazing. And it is awesome to see a company that has, is doing good, has a mission, and hopefully there's, some monetary gains because, you're not a nonprofit, I don't think.
No, I've dabbled with the concept. I was like, there's pros and cons to that. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Sure. No, it's okay. So let's talk about the business aspect because obviously things like this take capital, right? So I would be curious, like how, as you're kind of evolving this and it's growing and you're working out kind of the beta and the kinks and learning from your customers, you have a sales side, maybe, you need capital. This costs money to get out there.
Yeah. So every company has, its strengths and its challenges, of course. And every leader in a company is the same way. And so I think coming from the Air Force, and certainly from my childhood, I always prided myself on being able to do everything. Like my dad was really handy, so I'm really handy. My dad was good at business and I was good at business. And I think, and I always loved computers. And so I'm a programmer. And so like and the Air Force kind of encouraged the officers at least to sort of like be able to do all these skills, to like be able to dabble in a little bit of everything. And of course you're supposed to do your expertise, well. And so as an entrepreneur, I've always had this preference to figure it all out, to do the marketing myself, to do the programming myself, to do the labor myself. And then at a certain point, it's like, okay, yeah, I got this. but certain projects don't scale well with one person, and this is one of them. So what I'd like to say I figured this all out on day one, but what I ended up doing is programming the like the core software myself as I was going through the discovery process. Like, hey, I need registration. I need to go to these different schools. I wasn't sure what everything I needed was. I wasn't sure what the priorities were, and so that I don't want to say a prototype. It's more than a prototype, but that core stuff, that's what I did. And so the cool thing is, like, we have this working product and it's solid and it really serves our existing customers well. But I can't program that next level. And so we're working on finding a programming team to do that, and then design team to do that. And part of it is the speed thing. So if I had another,
So,
forever, that's not a problem, but I want to hire some
so
people
JJ, what I'm hearing you say is at some point in your maturity, you realize that you had to start delegating and you have a skill set that's good, but you're spread too thin. Like, how long did that take for you to figure out?
um, it's you sort of always know it, but I say it's for me it's kind of recent, and this maybe is, I've always focused on the leadership, but I've always been passionate about being able to do everything. And also, so actually, here's something lately. I got together with some other fellow business folks, and we talked about deep personal things. We talked about like hangups, and I was like, I want to program it all myself, and I want to do the marketing myself. It's like, well, I can, but I know that's not a way to build a business that's going to grow fast. And I changed my internal narrative, and I said, all right, by analogy, I thought of like a ship. And so, like, I'm a good woodworker, and I could build a little boat, and I can know to navigate the boat. But if I want to be like Shackleton, maybe it's not the best analogy, but if I want to go on a big expedition, I'm not going to build the boat myself, even though I can. I'm not going to navigate, even though I can. I'm not going to cook, even though I can. My job is like the expedition organizer, or maybe the captain. So I'm going to go and get people that are really good about raising money. And we're going to hire carpenters to build a ship, and we're going to hire a navigator to sail. And even though I could do all these individual things, that's not how to get a big expedition that's going across the ocean.
That's
And
the
that's
most
what we're
valuable
doing.
thing. Yeah, no, I mean, I hear that all the time with everybody. I mean, many of the guests, if you go back and check the show, hopefully you smash the like button. But that's been the common denominator when you hear about, entrepreneurs, is they get to a point where they surround themselves with people they trust.
Yeah.
Obviously, they always have their hand on the
Oh,
wheel,
yeah.
if
Yeah.
you will, because the quality control. But they get to a point where they surround themselves with good people, and they know that they can't be all things to all people eventually. And I mean, it can run that way if you want to keep a small contained company. But if you have so many different drivers, things that are going on, that you can't be the master of all domains.
Yeah, and sometimes it makes sense. It depends on the domain space, right? For my previous company that worked, to a point, we actually had a lot of instructors that we hired and taught, and that worked out fine. But for this one, like, we want to build this quickly and we want to scale it out. And so if we want to drag it out, then it just stays. My partner. There's four of us. My partner, and we have customer success and user experience, and we've done our stuff. And if we want to go fast and we want to launch in the spring, or our next level of product, then that takes extra funds. So we're getting ready to raise some money, and we have our pitch deck together on our next level of what we're doing. We're actually really excited about it. I think it's going to work out pretty well.
What's your thinking on the fundraise from capital structure stack? Is it going to be angel, private equity? Like, what's your thinking
Yeah.
on, and how did you come up with
Yeah.
the amount and all that?
Well, so the short answer is we're probably raising like 250,000, 500,000, something like that. How do we come up with that amount? Well, I go back, and as a programmer, I have experience both running projects and working with freelancers, and so I have a sense of what are we trying to achieve, what's the current rate for freelancers, and what's the current rate for staff? When do I want to bring on full-time staff? What can I do with freelancers in the meantime? You have to do experiments. And so it's a really use of funds thing. So we're raising this money to get to the point where we can finish the next level of product on where we think we could really run with it, figure out enough of the sales that kind of works well, and we could build up our playbook. And then after that point, we should be in a position to start scaling out. Um, so yeah, so it's not, it's not going to be VC. It's too early for that, but it's beyond angel. So it's like, somewhere in between there.
Somewhere in the middle. Now,
Yeah.
oftentimes when there's you have, I assume, competitors out there, right?
Yeah, it's the school space, right? And so as long as there's been software for schools, there's been people that market software for this space. And I actually started with this a long time ago, and it just, you can't, in my experience, take software for use for anything else and make it work for this space. So yeah, there's competitors, but I don't think that they are, you know, I hope I'm right, but I don't think they're approaching it the same way. They
Hmm.
have a different focus, and I'm fine with that.
Hmm. And how big do you think the space is? Is it globally? I mean, I don't even, candidly, you would know better than myself, but is it from the school budget that they allot, or is
Yeah,
it all
yeah,
private pay from like this is you have to pay extra compared to what the taxpayer is paying?
yeah. Well, so yeah, that's a great question. Different people go about this different ways, right? But we give our stuff to the volunteers, the PTAs, the PTOs. It's free for them to use it, and then we take a percent of the transaction. And so, because at a PTA, they don't usually have a credit card in the PTA's name to do this stuff. It's a different decision making process. So if they adopt it, and we'll customize it for them, and if they act with us in good faith, we don't sign a contract or anything like that, then it'll be useful. They'll keep using it, and it's just this fee off the top. We think we could have revenue expansion by offering more valuable services than just the ticketing. We have a lot of good ideas I think will make their lives a lot easier and happier. So yeah.
JJ, do you call that a subscription model in your world?
Well, I don't know what that is called. It's a transaction model, so it's like a fee off of each seat, like maybe Eventbrite does.
Hmm.
We're adding subscriptions on for our biggest clients. That the fee per seat doesn't really quite make sense, but for now, it makes perfect sense for us.
Hmm.
So it's
And would
not monthly recurring, but it is
yeah.
a reoccurring amount. As long as we're using software, we have a pretty predictable
Hmm.
revenue
Yeah,
stream.
that makes sense. And then back on the funding side, are there any public funds available for something like this? I know, there's a talk about the $3.5 trillion families and Child Care Act, and
Yeah.
we don't really know what's in the bill, quite candidly. But would there be a pool of capital across the country that you could kind of circle off for your
Yeah.
endeavor?
Well, we'll see, but there's not an obvious pool for that. We've been able to take advantage of a couple small things with COVID, frankly, because our classes shut down, and the state of Massachusetts was helpful for us, and it helped us keep the lights on. So that was kind of cool, but not really anything to sort of grow a business on that I know of. But we'll see. We'll keep digging around.
No, and this is kind of the futuristic machine, but oftentimes when we think about companies, and I'm sure you get these ideas all the time that you have to squash, but verticals, like what outside of enrichment,
Uh,
if you have this like fast forward machine, if you will, like I just
yeah,
personally, just because I have my last guest was an amazing guy, um, and he brought up the chess example, which you just did, and they started a company. Where you can customize gear, and it could be at the school level, but if it comes down to the chess club or the engineering club, there might be only 4 or 5 there, and then nobody's going to buy 20 shirts, but they could come in and get their chess club shirt
right.
customized to the name of the club. But I could see that as a partnership. But do you have any other,
Yeah, yeah.
not to give away your trade secrets, but do you see any other verticals that might be interesting? Because enrichment is the core,
Yeah.
but there's all kinds of things built around.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a good question. Of course, from a business perspective, what we looked at is that core enrichment, is it big enough? And because of my background, I have a really good sense for how many schools I think could do this. And I say schools, I really mean communities around the schools. How many schools could do this? And I'm pretty happy with the size of that. That being said, sort of like what we were talking about, there's this very closely related opportunity. And so if I use this at my local school, like the real thing that happens is that PTA person will talk to the other parents at the adjacent school because they're going to be on the same like baseball team or the same playground. So we have this nice progression of how to move from school to school. And then on top of that, beyond just the enrichment, we're really interested in, for that same set of parents, what are some other related services we could be offering? Fundraising is sort of an obvious one. And the beauty there is it's the same, logins, the same people, the same kids. Kind of, there is, it's a stretch on saying that's enrichment, but they're using those funds to make that kid experience better. So there's tightly adjacent verticals for the same set of customers. And then you step outside the PTA in the same communities. So a little different beast and a little different competitive landscape, but you have the sports teams that are organized. You have individual coaches that give private lessons. Adjacent to that, you have in a community tutors, you have music instructors and whatnot. And this might be in person and it might be online. And I have to tell you, like, actually the thing I'm really excited about, and this is down the road for us a little bit, we're super excited about this, is, there's this local component to this. And yeah, you have a class and you do it at school. Obviously, that's hyper local. But I want to work with the other people that are teaching in my community. And if I have to go online, either a future pandemic or just because, the times are sort of changing, wouldn't a person rather take an online music class or French class from somebody that lives in the same town or adjacent instead of from the other coast of the country or something like that?
Yeah.
So really excited about bringing that hybrid aspect of learning, but keeping it local,
Yeah, it's kind of like, not dissimilar.
Yeah.
Amazon, local farmers.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
know if that was by default. I mean, they realized probably logistically that they couldn't serve fresh fruit, but and they did. They do go back to the local communities and kind of rising tide type of mentality. So that's really interesting. So yeah, a local thing, and maybe there's like just because my 14-year-old's really into Legos, maybe there's partnerships. Where bulk wise in the future you could you negotiate deals with like Legos of the world, that kind of stuff, and because you get the product too, right? It's not just the schoolwork, it's the product that you have to work with.
Well, yeah, and then there's this. I mean, our really core thing, like the thing we know forward and backwards right now, is running after school enrichment classes. The things that get us excited is around the community. It's around the marketplace. Like, okay, how can we bring the class content to more people? When I was teaching classes, we did this electrical engineering class. Getting all those components to the kids, logistics was tough. If we have a way to handle that and streamline it, that's awesome. Also, there's opportunity there. And then there's this pattern, right? We're kind of saying we're community-based learning and the workflow and management and bringing those people together. That's a pattern that isn't just around schools, but you have gyms. My daughter takes circus classes. They have the same thing where you sign up and you have to, you want to interact with other parents, or you want to schedule a class, or you want to schedule a one-on-one session with an instructor. So, but they're not going to, that's just this different, same pattern, different industry, or gyms. And I think there's probably a whole bunch of others out there. So
yeah,
how big is this? How big is this? I could see the company being huge, but I'd be happy with a modest increase. Yeah, I'd be happy with something modest, but I think there's actually a lot of legs to it. So if it's me, or if it's my partner that runs it, 6 months, 6 years, 16 years from now, well, we'll find out.
Yeah, it'll be amazing to see. I do hear, being a business person myself, there's I think of verticals, but it's nice that you keep coming back down to what your core strengths are at the moment. You're building off of those, and the rest kind of takes care of itself when you execute really well with what your mandate is at the moment.
Yeah, that's the idea, and just go on data. I think actually, I mean, we've been talking a lot, but what we do now, every feature we go in is like because there was an issue or because there was like something we encountered at this community needs this feature, the next community needs another feature. So you put those in as we grow and we tackle these adjacent markets and these adjacent verticals. We'll see where the data leads us, and we have some theories, but we'll find out down the road.
Yeah, well, we'd love to have you back for that update, and when that comes, and we'll be Boston based here, tracking your success. And I know your business partner, someone I know not really well, but spent a enormous amount of time in an RV traveling across the country with him. He's a great person, and also a vet and super high quality person. So with that said, JJ, all your information about how people can track School Twist will be in the body of the show, as well as context to learn more about the company. I'd like to thank you for your time today. Great endeavor. It's always awesome to learn about a company that's doing good. And profits are important, but they're not the only thing. And eventually, if those two worlds meet up, when you're solving a need, which you are, and then the revenue can kind of follow, that's amazing as well.
Yeah, that's the theory. That's the theory. So, Mark, thank you so much for inviting me on your program. If anybody wants to learn more about the company, it's schooltwist.com. And if you need to find me, I'm JJ at schooltwist.com. But thanks. This is awesome. And if you want me to say smash that like button, yeah,
Please
I'm not
do.
20,
Yeah,
but yes, I
let's
suppose
smash
that's what we
it.
should do.
Yeah, we definitely would love to get the followership. And thanks again,
All
JJ,
right.
and we'll look forward to speaking with you soon.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small